Mahabir. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I was at the point when I was referring to the debate that was captured in 1999 in the Constitution Amendment Act number 29, and I was going to refer to what then Attorney General Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj would have said while addressing the Parliament of Wednesday, 24th of February, 1999. And he would have said, referring to the Constitution Amendment Bill then, that this bill is not about a measure of not only giving information from the service commissions, a part of the state administration, but giving information from government and government-owned operations. So, Mr. Vice President, the argument in 1999 was that the people of Trinidad and Tobago should hold government departments, statutory bodies, and service commissions who spend public monies accountable for their general conduct in the administration of public affairs. Part of that debate, the argument was that the most effective way in which the rights of citizens can be protected in societies like ours is by accountability and responsibility by those who exercise state administrative powers. And just to finally refer to then AG, this is what he said in that debate. These, and this is important, he said these select committees would be a novelty in that it would be the first time in Trinidad and Tobago that one would have the situation where on a continuing basis we would have the people through the select committees of Parliament scrutinizing governmental action and state administrative action. And Mr. Vice President, in that debate, reference would have been made to the 1974 Wooding Commission, which sat and reported that the parliamentary processes in Trinidad and Tobago were deficient. This is debate in 1999. And that Wooding Commission would have recognized that unless there was this continuous monitoring and scrutiny by these parliamentary committees, the rights of the people of Trinidad and Tobago were going to be denied. The point I'm making, Mr. Vice President, is that as societies grow, there must be a natural and equal parallel evolution and progression of our laws that meets the needs and the aspirations of the people. There was a school of thought then that the workings of the service commissions did not meet the standards and transparency and accountability expected by the public of its government and public institutions. A school of thought, Mr. Vice President, that suggested that our accountability and performance management framework was anachronistic, outmoded, and not fitting of the times. And the result of that debate, Mr. Vice President, well, the result of that debate in 1999 is that these commissions now report to this Parliament. And by way of example, numerous examples. In 2017, we had a report of a joint select committee on local authorities, service commissions, and statutory authorities, including the THA, and on an inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Public Service Commission. And in that inquiry, Mr. Vice President, the JSC sought to do such things as evaluate the performance of the Commission in executing its mandate, to determine whether the resources, systems, and procedures of the Public Service Commission were sufficient, and to determine the challenges that were affecting that commission and to find possible solutions and ways of alleviating those challenges. And then, of course, Mr. Vice President, we all know, most recently, of the Police Service Commission coming before the House to engage in a very important discussion relevant to the appointment of a Commissioner of Police. What we are saying then is that the Elections and Boundaries Commission performs a significant public function that touches and concerns several pieces of legislation. And there is need for this Parliament to have some kind of oversight. May I remind the House, the Senate, that the work of the EBC touches on the following pieces of legislation in its legal and constitutional authority to conduct elections. And those pieces of legislation are the Representation of the People Act, the Elections and Boundaries Commission Local Government Act, the Municipal Corporations Act, and the Tobago House of Assembly Act. So the EBC performs a very important function dealing with all these pieces of important legislation. So that this motion, through this motion, Mr. Vice President, we are seeking to provide an option. And that is what it is about, providing an option for reforming accountability and performance management. And my argument, and indeed the argument of this side, is that whilst we respect and aim to preserve the constitutionally guaranteed independence of the EBC, we are hopeful that we can look back at the objectives of the 1999 Parliament, consider those reforms, consider the spirit and the intent of those reforms, and to see whether, in the best interest of all the people of Trinidad and Tobago, those kinds of reforms could be applicable to the EBC. Today, Mr. Vice President, it is our hope that this Parliament of 2019 would bring similar degrees of accountability and transparency vis-à-vis the EBC in line with the expectations of a 21st century citizen. And maybe at this point I can pose the question. Since the introduction of parliamentary oversight into those 4 service commissions, police service, teaching service, judicial and legal service, since the introduction of oversight, has the independence of those commissions been eroded? And my answer, or our thinking on this side, is that it has not. The second argument, Mr. Vice President, in favor of this motion today, I want to look at Section 72 of the Constitution. I would not read the full section. I know several speakers before me would have alluded to it. But in a nutshell, Mr. Vice President, this is what Section 72 is. The EBC, the Elections and Boundaries Commission, is required to submit a report to the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House of Representatives showing recommended changes to the number and boundaries of constituencies, or alternatively, stating that no alteration is required to the existing maps in order to comply with Section 2 of the Constitution. And then Section 72 goes on to say that that report must be presented. There's a time frame in which the report is to be presented. It says that the draft containing modifications to the boundaries would be submitted by a minister designated by the Prime Minister. If there's need to amend the draft, and then the amended draft will be put before the House of Representatives. And then, of course, the draft order is submitted to the President and so on for signature. An important point, Mr. Vice President, is that the validity of that order coming from the House is not subject to any legal adjudication. Section 72(7), I believe it is. And I will come to that. So the effect of this motion, my point is, Mr. Vice President, is that there already appears to be some degree of reporting. And what we are saying is that there should be more. In many ways then, Mr. Vice President, the effect of this motion is to effectively extend that reporting function captured under Section 72. And why can't we extend that oversight, Mr. Vice President, in the manner in which we are saying now, in the manner in which we have been articulating today? But there are two small points that comes out of my reading of Section 72, Mr. Vice President, that I would like to raise here. And this is my interpretation of the law. And I think they're relevant. The first one is that when reports of the EBC relative to boundaries are tabled at the other place under Section 72(1), the designated minister seems to have significant power under Section 72(5), as it says the minister can submit an amended draft. But the section seems very silent, Section 72. It seems silent as to the extent that that draft must include the recommendations of the entire House of Representatives. There seems to be a very gray area there in Section 72. And also, Mr. Vice President, the fact that that report, only a simple majority is required for that report to be adopted in the other place. And that is how I interpret the section. It is therefore a bit of, in my view, it is somewhat ambiguous as to the extent the final draft reflects the wider view of the opposition. And the important point with respect to that is that what we are asking for here now, with some kind of parliamentary oversight, may solve that gray area of the law. So that the effect of this motion, Mr. Vice President, is that there would be public confidence when those reports are adopted in the other place, and there's no parliamentary oversight. The third point, as I move on, Mr. Vice President, has to do with what the Commonwealth Group said. And I know Senator Cummins, unfortunately he's not here, but Senator Cummins would have made reference to what the Commonwealth Group said subsequent to the election of 2015. And just to recap what he would have said, he said in his contribution, referring to Senator Cummins, that is, Senator Cummins, in referring to the Commonwealth Observer Group report of 2015, headed by Sir Paul Tuver, said that Trinidad and Tobago, this is September 2015, has a track record of credible elections, and the Commonwealth is committed to continuing its support of the country's democratic processes. Very nice. The report did in fact say that. Senator Cummins went on to say further, referring to the report, that these elections affirm Trinidad and Tobago's record of conducting credible and transparent elections and are a testament to the people's commitment to democracy. Very nice. The report also said that. And finally, in referring to the report, he said, Senator Cummins would have said, we wish to highlight the exemplary role played by the EBC, an institution that enjoys a high degree of confidence amongst the electorate and so on. Very nice. The report did say that. But what else did the report say? What else? Because I think that there has been a very selective and convenient use of this report. And if I may turn to chapter 6, page 32 of this report, dated September 7, 2015, Trinidad and Tobago Parliamentary Elections, the Commonwealth. This is what they said. They said that the Commonwealth Observer Group observed, they were making reference to the 2000 elections, observed that the 2000 parliamentary elections in Trinidad and Tobago was widely regarded as acceptable for electors to be registered and their votes cast in places where they no longer maintain continuing residency. The group recommended that the EBC review the regulations relating to voter registration to reflect this in order to ensure accuracy and to remove ambiguity. This is what the report said, Mr. Vice President. Noting this remains the case in 2015, we echo this recommendation. That's not me. That's the Commonwealth Group saying that. The EBC could consider developing a mechanism, including the possible use of technology, to deregister electors who are deceased, having immigrated or are no longer eligible to vote. And of course, the report went on to say, consider mechanisms to move voters to different districts as they acquire new residences and so on, as per the power of the Commission. As to questions of voter padding, Mr. Vice President, the Commonwealth Group said that whilst they did not observe any instances of allegations of voter padding in 2015, the EBC should look to ensure it has adequate measures in place to protect this practice. So when Senator Cummings would have asked, what is the mischief behind this motion? Well, the mischief is what the recommendations of this report are. And I would just refer to one other recommendation, Mr. Vice President. This is what they said at page 33. The number of voters claimed not to have received, there were a number of voters who claimed not to have received polling cards before the election day in advance. The EBC, they are recommending the EBC could also consider the use of other communication mechanisms such as electronic text to inform registered voters of their polling station. So Mr. Vice President, these were some of the recommendations made by the Commonwealth Group. And I think that it was, as I said, it was a very selective and very skillful piece of manipulation to use only some aspects of this report and not to come down to deal with the recommendations that the Commonwealth Group made. Because they made significant recommendations, as I just said. Now, the question that arises is whether the public is satisfied that these recommendations have been put into place, whether the EBC has given active consideration to these recommendations. That is the question. And if the answer to that question is no, even if the answer to that question is yes, how do we know? And if the answer to the question is no, then why not? And that is exactly why we are saying in this motion that parliamentary oversight would be able to deal with matters such as this. We can invite the ABC here to question them as to this Commonwealth report, questions as to voter registration, questions as to delay in sending polling cards to voters, and so on, and to find out whether or not this report has been acted upon. That is what effectively bringing the EBC over some parliamentary oversight. That is what this motion is about, Mr. Vice President. The other point that I want to deal with, Mr. Vice President, is the whole question of court of last resort, court being of last resort. Mr. Vice President, many years ago when I was called to the bar as an attorney, I was given some advice by an esteemed judge, retired now, and he said to me that in the course of consulting with your clients, try not just to seek legal redress in the court, but to seek solutions. What he said is that we make an attempt to fast-track a resolution without always seeking to invoke the jurisdiction of the court. And I have always kept that advice close to my heart. So when a country's election commission can be subject to review by the court, we must ensure that that is of last resort. We must develop the machinery, Mr. Vice President, to allow for such monitoring that could possibly make the engagement of the court's jurisdiction an option of last resort. And my point is, if there are people who have a legitimate expectation of an independent body doing its work, and then those people they are legitimately disappointed that that body did not do its work in a manner that they should, they could have the option of presenting their views to their member of parliament, through senators who could question the EBC before these committees. Why is it that if our people perceive, so effectively I'm saying, Mr. Vice President, is that the parliamentary mechanism would curtail the fears of the people. It would build their confidence. Why is it, Mr. Vice President, if some people perceive there to be an irregularity with the work of the EBC, that they turn to letters to the editor? I think one of the speakers would have made mention of that. Why would they turn to social media to express a disappointment or feelings that they are insecure about how the EBC does its work? We have to fix that. So maybe, Mr. Vice President, High Court action relevant to the 2015 election, that matter could have been averted if there was some kind of parliamentary oversight, so that the issue of extending the life of the election by 1 hour because of rainfall, those matters could have been ventilated here. Who took that decision? On whose instruction? How was that decision communicated to political parties who on election day were busy on the ground mobilizing their supporters? Those questions could have been raised here, and that court action could have been averted. That is the importance of the parliamentary oversight of which we speak, Mr. Vice President. And we know, Mr. Vice President, it has been said throughout this debate, that at different times, one party or the other party may object to some matter and be critical of the EBC. And then the other side would say, no, you are making an excuse for what is going to be the outcome of the next election. No, you are trampling on the rights of this constitutionally independent body. But I wonder what will happen if one day both parties, or all the parties in Trinidad and Tobago, and there are quite a few new parties and so on, what will happen if all these parties feel that they find themselves in disfavor with a decision of the EBC? What then? Who would they criticize? And that is why we are saying that this joint parliamentary committee would be able to deal with these matters. And then, of course, Mr. Vice President, if you have that parliamentary oversight machinery, it may be of last resort as well for political parties or government or opposition to seek meetings with the EBC because they now have this new option. They may maintain the right to go to the EBC for meetings, but this parliamentary oversight, a lot of those matters could be dealt here. And of course, Mr. Vice President, if that happens, well, I need to wind up, I need to move on. Indeed, if that happens, Mr. Vice President, all perceptions of political interference stand to be reduced, if not totally eliminated, as long as this Parliament has the right to call the EBC to discuss their concerns. Mr. Vice President, in the opening of the debate a few weeks ago, Honorable Minister Franklin Khan would have alluded to some of the different models. The independent model, the mixed model, and so on, the New Zealand model, and so on. But he stopped short of saying why those models could not be applied here. For example, in New Zealand, the electoral system, how it operates, they are subject to the scrutiny of the Parliament. The Justice and Electoral Committee has developed a practice of initiating inquiries after every election, and those reports are submitted to the Parliament for discussion. It's a very open and transparent system in New Zealand. And we are not saying to copy the New Zealand model, copy the Canadian model, cut and paste it. But we can find ways to develop our own model, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, in closing, I want to say, Mr. Vice President, that the time has come perhaps when we must change the narrative in this country. That when bills or motions are presented to this Parliament, it is viewed first and foremost from the political lens. UNC bring it, so it bad. PNM bring it, so it bad. The time has come, I believe, Mr. Vice President, when we must seek to look at matters dispassionately and from the perspective of what value it could bring. From the perspective of not who is the messenger, but what is the message. And whether this can help Trinidad and Tobago, whether this can aid generations to come when we are gone. I believe this is that time. Let it not be said, Mr. Vice President, that the Parliament of 2019 did not try to look at this question objectively. Let it be our legacy that we contemplated on the future, Mr. Vice President. And my support for this motion, Mr. Vice President, does not make me an enemy of the state or a foe of the government. I am a friend of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes. I thank you.
Senator Borris.
Mr. Vice President, I stand today humbled for this great opportunity to speak in this honorable Senate of our country. As a grassroots from San Juan, Palatovia, it is indeed a signal honor to be able to speak and to say a few words here on this important motion that was raised and moved by my good friend, Senator Wade Mark. But I will start by making this first comment or statement. And probably after I make this comment or statement, I probably need to say nothing further. I see the EBC as the regulator. I see the Parliament as those who are regulated. And therefore, to me, it will be passing strange for the regulated to have oversight over the regulator. From that point of view, some of the points raised by Senator Mahabir, when he raised up that the Parliament have oversight on various commissions, it is a vast difference to other commissions that has no relevance or direct situation or direct info in respect to the Parliament. The EBC has a direct nexus with the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. So I make the point again. To me, I can't understand why those who are regulated would want oversight of the regulator. To me, it doesn't add up in this particular case here, and I feel certain it may be well-intentioned, but it may end up, if this should become a reality, as extremely destructive in terms of our democracy. Mr. Vice President, it is indeed important that we look at this situation with an open mind. I listened to the words of Senator Timol when he referred to the report of the Commission. Excellent contribution. And he referred to the Commission's recommendations in one of the investigations that they had in the past. But none of the recommendations called for oversight by the Parliament. It called for several other things, putting this in place, putting that in place, but there was nothing to call for oversight by the Parliament of the EBC. And when you look at that, you understand that there should be a clear demarcation or separation from the EBC and, to me, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Because sometimes within the politics, there's a level of matrix. And sometimes what is, isn't, and what isn't, is. And sometimes you have to take the time to look through what is being said and what is attempted, or what persons are, or senators, or persons, or elected members will be attempting to cause or to have happen at the end of the day. I am convinced, Mr. Vice President, that this motion is ill-advised and ought not to be brought to make law at this point in time. I am convinced that we need to look at it carefully. And if we are stating, as my good friend Senator Hossain has said, that there's need for greater staffing, then let us do that. If there's need for greater, in terms of the EBC's operation being, there should be greater oversight. But I don't believe the oversight should come from the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. If it is that we need to be proactive and creative, then let's create the democratic oversight body, a special body appointed by the President, where the EBC will have to report to. But this, to me, is to cause the EBC to end up in a level of couture, as the case might be, on a level of bacchanalia, because you're bringing now the politics and the politicians to have their say on the EBC. And that, Mr. Vice President, in my view, is the road to corruption, confusion, and literally chaos. I feel certain that we need to look at this very carefully. And Senator Mahabir was making the point of, let's look at it not against from a party line. And I always, in the past, would speak on issues of that nature. Let's look at things from a national point of view, where we put country over party. And on that basis, if we are doing that, then we need not look at it from the point of view of just trying to get, because we want this put in place here. This can be extremely destructive. And therefore, on that basis, I feel once more that my good friend Senator Mark's motion is ill-timed and probably not appropriate for this point in time. I want to make another point where this is concerned. I feel that the EBC, over its long history, has proven that they can stand scrutiny. You've looked at every election, and I've recounted in the past when, on the 2 occasions or 3 occasions, when the PNM had lost elections, there was high commendation, there was high praise by the then ruling party for the EBC. If you understand that, it means that sometimes we may move from a point of view of what is politically convenient to find fault when we are at the point where we may be in opposition, as the case might be. But I look back and I saw nowhere where there was this concern or a problem placed while the UNC was in power in respect to the EBC. And therefore, I feel certain that we need to look again, reconsider our point of view where this is concerned, and ensure that when we make recommendation, it is in the best interest of the country, and we don't put our party over our country. I would not be very long time because I know there's an independent senator to speak after me. I want to give those who are here, to give them the full opportunity to make their contribution.
Members, okay, just remember it's the Honorable Senator's maiden speech and there's a precedent set. Continue, Senator.
Well, you want me to ramage. That I shall not do. But at the end of the day, it is important for us to understand the reason for being here. This is the highest body in the land. And there should be a level of sanctity in terms of our presentation and our performance whenever we sit in this hallowed chamber. It ought to be that we make recommendations that is truly in the best interest of the country, for our generation and for our future generation. This here to give oversight to the Parliament, I am certain in my consideration that this would just put us in further disrepute and put the EBC once and for all in some level of bacchanal, or they say in modern terms, bacchanalia. So I know I have the support of Senator Obika, and I know his vote will be, because he's my very good friend, a brilliant young man. Brilliant, brilliant young man. No. He's a brilliant young man. I would say he's a brilliant young man. His first mistake.
Again, members, as you are aware, precedence is set when a new member of the chamber is making the maiden contribution, so much so that there should be silence in the chamber to allow that member to do so. Senator Borris, continue.
And I will repeat, a brilliant young man who traveled Africa and came back home and made the worst mistake of his life.
I know it can't be this one because
Let me conclude, Mr. Vice President, by saying this to this honorable House. It is indeed a privilege and an honor for myself as a grassroots who want to inspire other grassroots that the sky is the limit and that you can be motivated to reach as far as you want. And I make the point that at the end of the day, it is but us taking the opportunity to reach out to each other, each one reach one. And where this bill is concerned, where this motion is concerned, sorry, I feel it is truly a mistake at this point in time. And I hope that that all senators would vote against this with passion, to note and to say that to do this or to put this bill in place, it is to bring the EBC into disrepute. I thank you.
Honorable Senators, before I call on the next speaker, permit me to congratulate Senator Borris on his maiden contribution to this honor of the House. Senator Deyalsingh.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for allowing me to contribute on this important bill, that's an important debate, the motion raised by Senator Wade Mark concerning the scrutiny that he asked this House to consider given to the EBC. We know we are in election season, the silly season as people may call it. I think it should be called embittered seasons because we have innuendos, character assassination, race, ethnocentric behavior. This is the name of the game in this season. So we may be attacking institutions who may need to be scrutinized or may not be. So I just want to follow the line. Should we scrutinize the ABC? So it might be exciting to some this season, but allegations of racial discrimination rears its ugly head, distribution of wealth in terms of partisan politics, allegations of jobs given to gangs, etc. All these come and actually, accusations of voter padding, house padding. These are accusations that are there. It's on the underlying. We have terms where people say that people may be hired according to jobs to prevent people from voting, like political soldiers. So these are part of our systems. We hear it. And we know the marginal seats especially. People may have complained that, they may be prevented from voting, or other people have been given jobs to, encourage people to go and vote. So that is our political landscape. But, the nation, with any downturn in the economy, the nation may have a psychic turmoil, and they may not be able to handle all these race talks and talks that we have coming from time to time. And these talks of race and even voter padding, house padding, this is part of our history. It was there for years. It's part of our history. It is ingrained in certain persons. Now, long ago, oil money may have buffered any sort of perceived political marginalization. But now, without that, you may have certain issues being exposed, vented. I would like to make reference and to read the alarming statements made by the opposition leader on Tuesday, the 16th April 2019, a Sita Prasad report in The Guardian, where I want to quote, Kamala slams EBC for corruption, fraudulent activities. The UNC leader, Kamala Prasad Bisesa, has slammed the Election and Boundaries Commission for corruption and fraudulent activities. She also called on the Police Commissioner, Gary Griffith, to investigate corrupt officials at the EBC, whom she accused of conspiring with the PNM to steal the general elections. I am calling on the Commissioner to launch an immediate investigation into these corrupt and fraudulent activities at the EBC, from the commissioners to the CEO to every single employee of the EBC, she said. Venezuelans were being issued TT identification cards as claimed on social media, questioning how Venezuelans could have TT ID cards, Trinidad identification cards. Clearly, these people are now registered to vote, she said, demanding a full forensic investigation. Prasad Bisesa claims there is a collusion with the Housing Development Corporation, the HCC, to manipulate the election through house padding, registering of non-nationals, moving electoral boundaries to swing seats in the PNM's favor. The EBC seemed to be working along with the PNM, she said, in creating votes for themselves. Now, these allegations that was made by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, it resonates globally. In Malaysia, there's the opposition leader in Malaysia, Ms. Wan Aziza, And she and all actually carried their election commission to court. And she actually said that they were also looking, to gerrymander the boundaries. And she took them to court, and their election commission had to have a month-long public review of the proposed changes in their boundaries. So the electoral boundaries in that country were changed, and it was noted that that country also, many people vote along ethnic lines in the diverse country. So it's there. It's in other countries, we may have that. Yeah. So I want to, look at what the opposition leader said, and I want to know, those are very serious allegations. And those allegations are allegations about an independent body established by our Constitution to safeguard our democracy. Are these allegations, it could damage the reputation of our country. Investors could shy away from a country like that. And I am looking at, are these allegations based on fact? Is it based on fiction? Or is it based on delusions, as Senator Baptiste Primus has said, some of the allegations may be delusions. So based on this, I would like to look at the opinions expressed in the newspaper. And I would really like to see that, if this is an opinion expressed by this leader, the opposition leader, it may be a view held by a lot of persons who have supported that party. So if that's a view, I think it's our duty to see how we could look at that view and dispel it, to see if it occurs, to see if it's real, if it's illusions. So then I would like to comment on these three factors: the immigration input, and two, I would like to comment on the fact of voter padding and the constitution, the changes of the boundaries. And the third aspect I would like to look at is the aspect of the EBC itself. So hence, I would look on immigration input. Our history has showed that we had allegations like that before. Did we ever, have allegations of outsiders coming to vote in elections? Yes. Academics have named, and it's in books where academics have claimed there were voter pardon, there's house pardon. The history has if you looked in and do those research, you can see those are mentioned. But I think if we look at, I'm not going to quote the academics. I look at a Calypsonian, and I see we have a Calypsonian here, and Miss Hazel Ahi. And I think the Calypsonians actually gives the pulse of the people, actually gives a pulse of what is going on at the time. So therefore, were there really allegations of immigrants coming in? And in that sense, I would like to quote one of my favorite Calypsonians, Brother Valentino. Life is a stage. And Brother Valentino, it was in a staff article, interview recorded June the 12th, 2005, posted on July 07, 2005. The power of the word is something else. And actually, what he actually stated here is, and this is a quote from him, Laventille is where the first voter pardon started. When the Grenadians and the small islanders and them came down here, they did not have any ID cards. All of them on the hill voted. The doc, Dr. Eric Williams, represented that area. That is why they are so loyal to the PNM. The doc used to say that they couldn't beat him in John John. It was his constituency. So in a time when race played a major part, around 1956, 1960s, here, this was a synopsis of what occurred here by a Calypsonian who actually, in my opinion, tells us what was the pulse, what was going on, what was noted. And, if those memories are there, some people will have these memories. I don't know if it occurs at this day and age, but we are looking at the fact that immigrants, Grenadians, was stated that came in. So while we had the Grenadians and small islands, do we now have Venezuelans and South Americans to deal with? I was appalled when I saw the ID cards being given out. And there were some excuses made, but then we have to find out from our security minister, was anybody charged for these fraudulent ID cards? How many more exist? If they exist, could they be used to sway the marginal seats? I mean, I look at the EBC, I've looked and tried to investigate. I know you have to have polling cards. And the polling cards, to me, would have been something that once it's there, you may still be able to have a non-national ID card, but not allowed to vote. But you see, the perception is there from before. And that perception may come now that people could manipulate the process with an immigration. So we have to appease the population. So the historical fact is we have the EBC to allay our fears and tell us this would not happen. Go in and look at these persons who are living in areas to make sure that you could tell us nationals that these people would not be allowed to vote. Historically, it may have been outsiders, but now we have something in place. We need that assurance. So because just one marginal may be the determining factor of who rules for the next 5 years. So do we have, when I look at it, do we have faith in the EBC? Should we now put it under scrutiny, as this motion moved by Senator Mark suggests? I will explore this later. But I want to look at point 2, the allegation of HGC and house padding with the boundaries. Now, this is a fact that also affects the UK, because right now, in the UK, there is a move in the UK, Madam President, where the election commission there, the IBC, the Independent Boundary Commission, is mandated to reduce the seats from 650 to 600. So right now, there is a state of dismay by the Labour Party because they stand to lose 25 seats. So England, the seats will decrease to 32, Wales to 11, Scotland to 6, North Ireland, it decreases also to around 7. So we are finding here that even in that Westminster system, concerns are raised about the fact that, you know, this Independent Boundary Commission is going to reduce the seats. So it's a global phenomenon where the politicians will have to look at their seats. So therefore, the fact now we are looking at the HGC and house padding, the fact that there are always safe seats, both parties know they have safe seats in their bag along ethnic lines, so we know we have the ethnic polarity that exists. It's a political reality. It's from our history, from the days of the DLP representing a certain segment, the PNM representing, so that is a historical fact. But has houses and unemployment been used to manipulate the system? It has been in the past. We had certain reports from esteemed Selwyn Ryan alluding to the fact that those things exist. And I beg to also read the HDC Project Delivery Deficit, published on Thursday, the 25th January 2009, an article by Afra Raymond on property matters. And he said the HEC ambitious development program has long been an issue of great national concern. Reason for this range from concerns as to whether the target of 100,000 new homes in a decade was realistic. Who is going to be allocated the new homes, their location in relation to existing communities, shades of voter padding and coded racism.
Senator Deyalsingh, I've allowed you some time to develop your presentation, but I just want to remind you to just try and be a little closer to the motion, okay?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I just wanted to develop the point that the leader of the opposition made about house padding, voter padding. Is it exist? Is it in the psyche of the people? Is it there already that we need now to look at the ABC to see, show us how you could, you know, you could convince us that there's no migrants coming in, there's no house padding, you know, you're above board. And this is what I'm hoping to develop. And I want to just quote Hansard, the late Kelvin Ramnath, while debating Equal Opportunities Bill, Monday, May the 21st, 2009, where he actually looked again at the distribution of the houses that was given in his area. And he also questioned that, you know, that at the time when the Carney lands were distributed, the HCC was challenged in the fact that how did they distribute? And he brought in that. And he actually made an interesting point. He said, you know, he actually said that the HCC distribution, while he thinks it was unfair, and he actually brought out the point that when the PNM chooses to allocate houses, 99% of the houses which have been constructed by the agencies to Afro-Trinidadians. So he came with that. But after along his line of argument, he said it may be more to political patronage rather than race. But the whole idea, he said, is the unfair distribution of homes could be used to sway votes. And the same argument that occurred then is the same that we are hearing now from the leader of the opposition. And just even recently, in the allocations of apartments in the NUGFW, same allegations were raised. How are you distributing it, these homes? What percentage, were given to supporters? So all these are things as a society, we have to look at equity and fairness so people would not feel disfranchised. So if house padding is a way of entrenching yourself in power, it is only natural politicians would want to utilize this method. And it is not against the law to build houses in marginals. However, what may alarm me is you don't build it in flood-prone areas, you don't build it in farmlands, you don't build it in prime agricultural areas.
Singh, the motion is centered on the EBC, but you seem to be focusing a lot on HDC, and I need you to be a little more specific to the motion, okay?
Madam, I wanted to elaborate that if HDC has been accused of that from Independent, Afro Raymond, from Mr. Ramnath, from just recently, if we are to evolve to let people feel a sense of fairness, there has to be some connect with the HCC when they are building homes and the EBC to see about the safety of the states, not just from civil society to object for the environmental issues. So I'm saying that this is something we have to look at, a connect there. So we need a system where we will have that. Now, I want to elaborate now, a point that even persons must demand transparency in housing allocations and given objectives. But point 3, raised by the leader of the opposition, raised concerns from the commissioners, the CEOs, etc. Is it a valid concern? Is it a valid concern to say the EBC itself and the personnel may be corrupt and may give in to the government and listen to the government? Well, you see, I try to figure, is that so? I mean, how could I judge this? Well, I judge this really when I looked at different persons who actually said things about the EBC in the past, persons who I admire, who looked at the EBC and said, hey, you're not functioning good. Now, those persons, when they were in opposition, they sang all sort of things against the EBC, but when they are now in power, or when they are occupying the seats of government, they seem to have selective amnesia. And it occurs right through. And why I say it occurs right through? Because it is also, I remember in the first session of the 6th Republican Parliament, when the Election and Boundaries Commission, the Public Commission of Inquiry, it was raised in the 2000, after the 2000 general election, the then opposition PNM through the MP, who is our present Prime Minister, Diego Martin, MP for Diego Martin, raised a private motion members bill where he actually asked for the scrutiny of the EBC. So here you are, present Prime Minister did that, a past Prime Minister asked that, and even when you looked at it, even then, we had a deceased Prime Minister, Mr. Patrick Manning, also looking at the fact and wanting and questioning voter padding and questioning the run-ins of the EBC. So here you are, people from different parties asking it, persons who may have disagreed with each other in the same party asking for one common thing, looking at the EBC at different times. So the common thread is there. Different parties ask for it. So I'm saying that if it's there, we the people must say, well, if those esteemed gentlemen ask for it, we should ask for it. Don't get involved in the politics, but get involved in the fact that they had questions and we need the answers also. So I remember even a previous head of state tried to remove someone from one of the EBC and had to rescind that decision. So there is something with the EBC that through time people may question. So therefore, what I would like to say, Madam Vice President, is when, I ask myself, why would these people, when they are in opposition, say one thing, and when they are in power, say another thing? Is it that, as some persons alluded on the other side, that if you're going to lose elections, you save face by saying, well, the other side steal the election, they gerrymander the boundaries? Or is it really something that, that we should look deeper into, that there is something about the EBC that may be under the control of the government of the day. Maybe, I'm saying maybe. So therefore, my problem is, should we interfere with an independent body? Should we really look at this independent body? Should we scrutinize this independent bodies? Section 7(1) and 12 of the Constitution, which actually fused the Electoral and the Boundaries Commission together. They were two separate entities. And
President, I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, June 4th at 1:30 p.m. On that day, Madam President. Sorry, thank you.
Honourable Senators, before I put the question on the adjournment, leave has been granted for two matters to be raised. Senator Obika. Senator Obika.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I stand today at the adjournment of the Senate to raise the issue of the failure of the government to address as a matter of urgency the deplorable condition of the road network in Moruga and environs. I want to take us back to the 16th of January 2016, Madam President. As the rest of the country woke, going about their daily routine, some residents of Moruga found themselves in what was reported in TT Talk to be a virtual prison. And this was after the access roadway to Indian Walk and Moruga was dilapidated and caved in. And there's another headline from the Trinidad and Tobago Guardian of the 17th of January 2019 by Kevon Felmy, titled, "Residents Cut Off as Road Collapses." Where many residents of Indian Walk, Princestown, were forced to walk through a ditch or the bushes to get to and from their home. Now, whilst this matter was addressed because, of course, the residents protested en masse, it had to be fixed. What this matter that I'm raising speaks to is the general disrepair of the road network in Moruga. And, Madam President, I had to journey to St. Mary's for a very important occasion. It was the occasion of the Monday night forum of the United National Congress in the constituency of Moruga Tableland. And would you know that even the speaker system that we were carrying to the Monday night forum was affected because of the poor state of the roads from Princestown to St. Mary's. So they didn't even have to reach Moruga proper. So, Madam President, I hear the Honourable Minister of Trade asking why we didn't fix it. But if you are familiar with this area, and I understand that my grandmothers are Jones and they are American extract, the area is prone to land slippage perennially. So therefore it needs a perennial system of road maintenance and support. So the government has failed in their duty to the people of Moruga. Now, and there's another headline, and it grieves me to see this headline, because it's titled, "Moruga MP Heckled by Protesters Over Bad Roads." So it has gotten to such a state that the people of 6th Company, New Grant, all right, where I have family members living, they protested to the point where they did not want to hear the Member of Parliament. What does that lead to? That really falls squarely with the matter that we are raising here. And the last point I want to raise, and I hope the responder from the government addresses why these things are allowed to happen in 2019, is that the PNM government has a slate of empty plans for Moruga. On 19th of May 2017, the government had a panel of members of parliament, and they were promising many things, one of which was the Tech Park, promised to give rise to employment of over 500 persons. This is the 19th of May, 2017, over 24 months and a week ago, Madam President. A very long time. But what you have is a government facing an election in just about 12 months, It could be less, depending on how the mood of the country swings. And not a single job, not a single sustainable job is ready to be created. In fact, we had to suffer to hear that the tech park is only 48% complete.
Speaker, I am reluctantly making this intervention because on matters on the adjournment, I tend to give as much leeway. But your motion is the deplorable condition of the road network in Moruga and its environs. And you're just going very clear of that motion. I really need you to try and be a little closer to your motion, please.
So, Madam President, what I'm bringing to light is that the residents in Moruga had to force themselves to block the roadway each year. Each year of this PNM government being in office, they had to force them, they had to bring themselves to the point of protesting. They had to bring themselves to the point of chasing the MP. Madam President, the state of the road network in Moruga needs to be fixed. But there's a solution. The solution is on the horizon. And as they look to the rising sun, that comes with every new day, they will see that the repairs to the road from Edward Trace, which will form part of the Guayaguayari, Moruga, Cedros belt, under the government to come, will see a rise in reliance on road transportation in the area. Persons will no longer have to be friends of the bamboo with all their money to fix their cars, to fix their maxi taxis. Because the people of Moruga, really and truly, have a new day coming. And I hope the minister would answer to the people of Moruga, who obviously will be listening, as to why at the end of their 4th year in office, they have failed to fix the road network in Moruga, St. Mary's, and by and large, the constituency of Moruga Tableland. I thank you.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I don't know if I can make a plea to get the remaining 6 minutes that the senator had. I have so much to say on Moruga. Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the motion before us, which seeks to address the failure, also said by the Honorable Senator, the failure of the government to address, as a matter of urgency, the deplorable conditions of the road network in Moruga and the environs. Madam President, I would like to draw to the attention of the Honorable Senate one of the strategic initiatives of this government, as stated in the National Development Strategy of 2016 to 2030, better known as Vision 2030, which is to improve and expand the road infrastructure network. In doing so, emphasis is placed on the expansion of the road network to facilitate safer, efficient movement of people and goods. Moruga, Madam President, is one of several roads earmarked for construction. And Madam President, I just want to go into Cabinet note, July 13, 2017, where Cabinet agreed to the rehabilitation of the Moruga Road from Pitikafe Junction to Marak Village in Moruga to be undertaken by the Program of Upgrade Road Efficiency, the Pure Unit of the Ministry of Works and Transport, for an estimated sum of $178.3 million. Madam President, that project had its, the financial approvals for it was $4.2 million in 2016-2017, $33.3 million in 2017-2018, $84.3 million in 2018-2019, and $56 million in 2019-2020. The program of works was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1, the bridges and road rehabilitation. Phase 2, the bridge and slope stabilization. And phase 3, the road rehabilitation. Madam President, just to indicate the details of the work, including the milling and patching and resurfacing of roads, the road segment, stabilization of 22 slopes, construction of 4 bridges, construction of 2 culvert crossings, repairs to approximately 22 culvert crossings, roadside drainage, and the installation of signage and so. Madam President, this government is diligently following through with the plans in what is being put on, contrary to what is being put forward by the Senator today. I wish to emphasize that the Ministry of Works and Transport have executed several projects on the road in Maruga and the environs. Madam President, this motion again is another motion that the Honorable Senator brought, and he really couldn't stick to the motion because really and truly he probably doesn't know Maruga, never went to Maruga, so cannot identify the projects. Madam President, let me just give you, no, I have, you see, I can't help but say that, because if the member had gone to Maruga, he would have recognized what is happening in Maruga. Madam President, from September 2015 to date, the following projects were completed in Maruga and the environs. Bridge 1.13, Maruga Road. Bridge construction completed on the 10th of September 2018. Bridge 14, Laloon Road. Bridge construction completed 12 July 2018. Maruga Road, cement stabilization from Piti Cafe Junction to Perry Young Road, completed June 2018. Lomwai Road, road rehabilitation, completed 18 September 2017. Frederick Settlement, improvement to drainage and chainage 0 to plus 300 to 2 plus 200, completed March 2017. Ganesh Trace, improvement to drainage, completed 13 February 2017. Looney Road rehabilitation, completed 22nd February 2016. Looney Road, 2 slope stabilization, chainage 0 plus 250 and 0 plus 350, completed 18th November 2015. Clearly, you have been going to Maruga for rum on a Monday. Madam President, additionally...
I rise and standing order 46-6. This insinuation about going for rum on a Monday, what is that? What is that?
Madam President, I apologize. It's a tight tongue. It's really rum, but Madam President, it's my fault. I apologize. I just...
That is unacceptable, Madam President. Please. Please.
Pronounce it properly, right? It's forum. All right. Madam President, additionally, no, Madam President, I just reported on work completed, right? Madam President, additionally, there are a number of ongoing projects in Maruga and the environs. These are the Maruga Road, 10 slope stabilization packages are the following chainage, of which 7 are near completion. Madam President, I can go through the 10 here, but it doesn't make sense going through that. All right, chainage 3 plus 600, chainage 14 plus 300. Now, these are different stages of the Maruga Road. Chainage 15 plus 625, chainage 16 plus 350, chainage 16 plus 400, chainage 16 plus 720, chainage 18 plus 550, chainage 18 plus 750. Now, these are 10 ongoing slope stabilization. Construction of 2 culverts at chainage 14 plus 550 and 15. These are 75% completed. Cement stabilization from Samuel Cooper Road to Rochard Douglas Junction, 63% completed. Drainage and concrete. Sorry.
Members, please, I allow a little whatever that is. But could you all please not be raising the volume as you are, okay? Minister, continue.
Madam President, I didn't tell them to bring this motion. They brought it. Madam, drainage and concrete work from Pitikafe Junction, chainage 11 plus 300 and 19 plus 800, 75%, no. Road rehabilitation, chainage 500, 5 plus 500, 98% completed. Bridge 1.5, Laloon Road, bridge construction. Land acquisition is in progress. Madam President, and those are ongoing projects, right? Madam President, it is noteworthy that these are upcoming projects now. Projects scheduled to come on stream by the end of May, which is next week, right? 5 additional slope stabilization package. Right? Bridge 122, again, to be started next week. So we have right now, Madam President, clearly they don't know where Maruga is.
So you have 1 more minute.
Madam President, it is clear the Honorable Senator has not done his research. Somebody gave him a paper to come and read. Madam President,
Sad.
this government is committed to bring in relief to the people of Maruga, and I'm quite happy to hear the senator say that it is an area where the soil continually have movement. And we started with 22 projects for slope stabilization. We're up now to about 40. But we intend to complete all and have a brand new upgraded road to Maruga long before the 2020 general election and long before we complete and the port in Maruga. And very soon, Madam President, the senator will take the road when he go to visit the industrial park in Maruga. I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Thank you very much. Madam President, I rise to the defense of the unprotected prison officers in Trinidad and Tobago. And the failure thus far of the government to protect their lives. Madam President, prison officers have been under siege over the last 2 decades in Trinidad and Tobago. Some 28 prison officers have been murdered in this country. Imagine in just 2 decades, and just about 22 years, 28 prison officers have been brutally murdered in this country. Madam President, when you look at the United States of America, for the last century, 1901 to 2019, only 20 prison officers in 1 century in the United States have been murdered. Too many, but 20 in a century. In 22 years, 28 prison officers have lost their lives. Madam President, the United States has 365 million people with 50,000 correctional officers. We have 1.4 million people with 2,000 prison officers. 28 perish thus far. Today, Madam President, Trinidad and Tobago is rated as the country with the highest murder rate among prison officers in the world. In the world, Madam President. What is required to stop this scourge, this kind of slaughtering of our officers, Madam President? You know what is required, Madam President? We need a proper law enforcement safety act as exists in the United States of America, where, Madam President, officers in the United States, correctional officers, are given, Madam President, the right to carry a concealed firearm whenever they are off duty. That is what we need in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam President. Madam President, the government has said that they are going to procure some 250 firearms for prison officers. This may be a short-term measure, and I'm sure the prison officers would welcome this short-term measure. But, Madam President, what is needed to address this issue of providing appropriate security measures to protect the lives of our prison officers is what I have just alluded to. We need a new piece of legislation on law enforcement safety for our prison officers in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, the question may well be asked, why the delay? When there was kidnapping in this country and the business community was up in arms, the government of Trinidad and Tobago responded positively. Madam President, we established the anti-kidnapping legislation to bring an end to that scourge. We also established the necessary apparatus and policy measures to ensure that the appropriate mechanisms were in place to deal with the matter of kidnapping. Today, Madam President, we can say that kidnapping has been almost eliminated in Trinidad and Tobago. You have elements of it from time to time, but it has gone. Why the government has taken so long to come to the rescue of our prison officers? Why? Why they have not brought similar legislation to protect our prison officers in this country so that we can deter those elements, Madam President, who are inclined to do harm to our prison officers. So, Madam President, I am asking the government today to tell us what are their plans for the prison officers. When is the government going to bring legislation to protect our prison officers in this country? And as I said, Madam President, it is not, whilst we welcome, and they would welcome, arms, firearms, 250, as we are told, we need to go a step further by bringing legislation, Madam President, to protect our officers in the prison service, Madam President. Madam President, we know that the government is speaking to the issue of addressing the trafficking of illegal items into prison, and they will bring appropriate legislation to address those matters. But where is the legislation? We have not seen it. Madam President, you would also know that as we deal with protecting the security of prison officers, one of the areas that the government needs to pay attention to is housing for prison officers. Prison officers cannot live anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago. Their salary levels are very low. The cost of renting homes are very high, or is very high for prison officers, Madam President. And therefore, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has to pay attention to this issue of housing accommodation for our prison officers. Madam President, we also have to ensure, as we deal with prison officers in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to look at the whole issue of building, Madam President, a purpose-built, modern-day, dedicated remand facility in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, the time has come when we must invest in what I would call a purpose-built, modern-day, dedicated remand facility to facilitate, Madam President, better treatment of prisoners. Madam President, there's a link between not only the slow pace of justice in terms of going to courts, but there's also, Madam President, the treatment that would be meted out to prison prisoners in the prisons if you don't deal with this particular proposal that I am suggesting for the government's consideration, which will bring about, Madam President, better treatment of our prisoners and also separate and classify prisoners so you don't mix the common criminals with those persons, Madam President, who are first-timers, so that they can have better treatment meted out to them. All of these measures will go a long way in bringing about greater protection for our prison officers in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Madam President, I appeal to the government today to really get cracking on bringing the appropriate legislation. Don't just give the people arms. That is inadequate, Madam President. Let us get legislation as exists in the United States of America in order to protect our prison officers. They are exposed to too much elements in this country.
Senator Mark, you have 1 more minute.
Madam President, thank you very much. Madam President, they are exposed and they are open to being harmed, as we have witnessed over the last 2 decades in Trinidad and Tobago. We need to bring a stop to this. I have brought this motion so that the government, if it is like Rip Van Winkle sleeping, they are in deep slumber. This motion is designed to wake up the government, to let them act and act in defense of our prison officers. I thank you very much, Madam President.
Acting Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I don't know if it's my enhanced vantage point today, but I thoroughly enjoyed that contribution. It's almost as though Senator Mark has found himself on this side. And you've used the magical word, Senator Mark, legislation. You are in love with it. So that is my starting point. Examine the 28 deaths, 28 murders involving the prison officers. I wonder how many were committed by firearms. I would guess it's 100% of them. I wonder how many of them were committed by persons who might have been on bail. I guess it might be 100% of them. So let us talk about legislation. You have before you in this House a bail bill.
Well, I was very specific.
And I wondered, when I listened to the acting police commissioner at the time lament the fact that the refusal of the opposition to extend the time further for the restrictive bail conditions caused a lot of criminals to be put on the street when they should have been behind bars. And I wonder how many of those criminals who should have been behind bars were out on the streets terrorizing prison officers. So what we have in this House and what is due for debate shortly is serious bail legislation. And my hope, Senator Mark, is that your bench supports us, supports the government and the prison officers to ensure that we would have the sort of bail legislation that takes us back to that period when you were in government and you got our support.
You're confusing the issue.
And we would be able to protect prison officers in this country from criminals who should be behind bars and not on the streets. We have laid in this House, Senator Mark, firearms amendment bill. Because, Senator Mark, as it happens now, you could go to the magistrate court on a charge of having a handgun, and you could pay a fine of $2,500 and walk out and acquire another gun. And it's unthinkable. I wonder how many of those 28 prison officers found themselves on the raw end of a handgun, the holder of which should have been behind bars for about 10 years. So you have in this House a firearms bill, which will most likely be debated on this side of the recess. It is draconian, and I'm very proud to say that. For the first time in this country, you will have 3 tiers. The first will bring you some tiers, a significant fine, and some jail time. The second offense will bring you a bigger fine and some jail time. And the third one, Senator Mark, will bring you life imprisonment. Because for people who want to walk around with illegal firearms and threaten our prison officers, I think they should be in the jail. And the third piece of legislation, which we would like to debate next week, Tuesday, is some small amendments to the suite of legislation, long work. And that is the final piece on the indictable proceedings bill that will assist us in removing this thing called preliminary inquiries. You see, Senator Mark, the longer we take to put these criminals behind bars in this two-tier criminal trial process, the more time they have to kill witnesses and the more time they have to interfere with the prison officers. And finally, Senator Mark, we have a bill that will be laid at the next sitting of the House, I don't want to anticipate it, called the Law Enforcement Officers Bill, that will introduce not only protection for prison officers and law enforcement officers, but also sanctions for those officers who get themselves on the other side of the law. And that piece of legislation will work with the bail amendment bill, the firearms bill, and the indictable proceedings bill to bring what today you have said and you have demonstrated you are in love with: legislation, 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 legislation.
Leader of government business, just.
Madam President, I just want to go back to when we moved the motion on the adjournment, and I want to say that we propose to sit next Tuesday, June the 4th, from 10 a.m. And on that day, we would like to deal with a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Administration of Justice, Indictable Proceedings Act 2011, Act number 20 of 2011.
Honorable Senators, before I put the question on the adjournment, I will invite members to bring greetings as we celebrate Indian Arrival Day. Minister of Works and Transport.
I's a real Brahmin. I'm a Brahmin. Madam President, colleagues of this Honorable Senate, on behalf of the government bench and by extension the government of Trinidad and Tobago, it gives me great pleasure to extend warmest greetings on the occasion of Indian Arrival Day. Indian Arrival Day commemorates the arrival of East Indian indentured laborers in the Indian presence in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is well known for its diverse culture. We identify its presence as a conduit to advance our development as a nation. This country enjoys the unique, distinct, and interracial and inter-ethnic inclusion and harmony. The Indian presence in our country spans 174 years and expresses itself in Diwali Nagar, which has now become a world-class franchise showcasing Indian culture in the Western Hemisphere. Moreover, Ram Leela was brought to the world prominence in the late Derek Walcott acceptance speech for the world-renowned Nobel Prize in Literature. In the musical sphere, the genre of the chutney have catapulted the Indian culture art form onto the world stage. Also, the quintessential Trini doubles and Plory made its foray into American households through recent aid on the sitcom. The Food Network channel recently featured the ubiquitous roti and actually explored the steps in creating the dal puri. Moreover, the dominant Indian spirit of sacrifice, commitment, courage, and faith have created legacies for success in education, commerce, musical art forms, and politics. May we always be proud of the abundant inherence of values and expression Indians have passed on to the entire nation. Madam President and colleagues, may God bless our nation as we continue to embrace the fabric of culture, which is our heritage and an abundant inheritance that have enriched and influenced many generations of our nations, past, present, and those to come. I thank you, and a happy Indian Arrival Day to everyone. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam President. Assalamu alaikum, Sitaram, and good evening to all those in the Senate and who may be listening. In May 1845, our forefathers would have left their homeland on the Fatal Razak and journeyed to Trinidad and Tobago in search of opportunity, hope, and a new beginning. On Thursday, we will celebrate 174 years of the arrival of the first group of East Indian on our shores. Their arrival marked the period of indentureship. They were unaware of the challenges and the working conditions that they will meet. They overcame those hurdles and made sacrifices. While some of them died as a result of the harsh conditions, they used every means possible to survive. Today, many of us owe a great deal of gratitude to our forefathers, for our very existence is dependent on them. We are here as a result of their sacrifice. Some may argue that it should not be a day of celebration, but I beg to disagree and say that it is a day in which we can acknowledge the invaluable contribution of the East Indian community in Trinidad and Tobago. History will show that most of our ancestors who arrived were uneducated, as they were unable to read or write. However, they would have clutched to the belief that education remains the gateway out of the cycle of poverty. Through their steadfastness and productive nature, they ensured that their children and grandchildren were educated. Through struggle and labor, today the offsprings of the indentured laborers play a critical role in shaping the direction of Trinidad and Tobago. They have occupied seats in this parliament, in court as judges and magistrates. They held the highest office of the land, the office of the president, office of the prime minister, leader of the opposition, lawyers, doctors, engineers, Nobel Prize winners, and much more. They have toiled in the sugarcane fields to ensure that their children have a space at the table of decisions. A creative people they are, as they brought with them their enchanting music, which is still played and taught. We are lucky that today you can still hear the beating of the dantal, the dholak, the majira, and the mesmerizing sounds of the harmonium. Their culinary skill is one of a kind, as we enjoy their sweets, their dishes, in particular curry and roti, and our indigenous doubles with slight pepper. A people who held strongly to their teachings and religious principles brought with them their holy books, such as the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, and the Holy Quran. As they chose to travel over the Kalapani, fearful as they may have been, but sought comfort from the fact that they are protected by a supreme being. While they would have suffered on the plantations at the end of indentureship, they did not give up. They instead made Trinidad and Tobago their home. They created a community of unity and harmony as they nurtured their future generations. Their values and traditions were incorporated into today's society, adding to the multi-religious, multicultural, and multi-ethnic society that is Trinidad and Tobago. While we may be different and while we came on different boats, we are one society, we are one country, but most importantly, we are one people. Let our differences unite us instead of divide us to build a brighter and prosperous Trinidad and Tobago. While our ancestors may have chanted Jai Hind, which means victory to India when they left India, today their generations chant Jai Trinidad and Tobago, victory to Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Timal.
Thank you, Madam President. As we have heard, May 30th, 2019 will mark the 174th year since the arrival of indentured laborers from India to work mainly in the cane fields of Trinidad and Tobago. The very terms and conditions of their entry were to have a profound impact on their way of life and their subsequent settlement in a foreign society that presented many challenges. 174 years can be viewed from many aspects: social, political, religious, cultural, and also from the viewpoints of specific interest groups and stakeholders. But I'm sure all will concur that with an unbreakable spirit rooted in their beliefs and culture, these indentured forefathers, approximately 145,000 of them, secured victory against the almost impossible odds of coming to terms with the sudden and drastic change in their lives and the adaptation to the hostile conditions in which they found themselves. Through their toil, courage, dedication, and sacrifice, our indentured forefathers secured victory against their seemingly unsurmountable challenges. They triumphed over civilizational dislocation, oppressive working conditions, social and religious discrimination, ridicule, atrocious housing conditions, and exceedingly poor health facilities. Their toil and sacrifice created a more prosperous and easier pathway for their following generations and contributed significantly to the development of our nation. Amongst the understandable celebrations, Indian Arrival Day can also provide us with a time for self and national reflection and introspection. There are two major historical events that allow us the opportunity for this reflection and introspection. And I refer to the narrative of Ciudad Sadu and the building of the temple in the sea, and the Muharram massacre, or known popularly as the Jose riots, during which 24 of our indentured forefathers were massacred in October 1884 by the British to control the indentures by denying them what they believed was their right to freedom of religious and cultural expression. These are two momentous events in our history. These two momentous events in our history should remind us at all times of the values which shaped the life of our forefathers. Perseverance, never giving up, not ever giving up, having the ability to accept setbacks and overcome the odds to secure success in your lives. Unshakable faith, have unshakable faith and a deep sense of belief in yourself. Faith rooted in self-religion and culture will overcome all oppression and obstacles. Bravery and courage, to stand firm for what you believe in and to defend your rights at all costs. And sacrifice, the ability to sacrifice to the welfare of others selflessly and to sacrifice for future generations and their welfare. Should these universal and noble values find manifestation in our individual, collective, and national life, then we will really be honoring the legacy of the indentures as we strive to build our beloved nation. Madam President, on behalf of all of the independent senators of this Honorable Senate, I would like to extend and wish the nation a happy and reflective Indian Arrival Day 2019.
Honorable Senators, I too will begin by reminding all that this Thursday we celebrate the 174th anniversary of the arrival of the first indentured laborers to our country. Trinidad and Tobago is, has been, and will always be grateful to those who arrived then, to those who followed, and to those who, having followed, now continue the march towards national development. Their contributions are reflected in every sphere of national endeavor, and as we celebrate Indian Arrival Day, we celebrate and revel in the diversity, the harmony, and the blend of every creed and race in Trinidad and Tobago. May I extend happy Indian Arrival Day greetings to all members of the Senate, to the members of staff of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and to all of Trinidad and Tobago. Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, June the 4th, 2019 at 10 a.m. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to Tuesday, the 4th of June, 2019 at 10 a.m.